What a wonderful world. What a wonderful world.
The Mustang III would be really nice to see in game. You know, we have one of the Mustangs as a premium for the British. I don't see why this could not be added either. It has 450 caliber machine guns. It could also carry drop tanks. It could also carry extra bombs, and on top of it, it served until the end of the war. This was one of those aircraft which was a Lend-Lease one, which was modified by the British and was used until 1945. So yeah, I mean, why not? Why not add this into the game? Since it isn't just a carbon copy of another Mustang, there is a British element to it in the form of the Malkin Hood cockpit. The next one is from Cherry Blossom, and it's pretty much an advocation for the Ocher. Now, if you don't know what the Ocher is, it's a man-made suicide bomb, or I suppose is how you would class it. So, he talks about the two ways that you can add it in. We'll go into the Ocher in a sec. You can either use the launch torpedo mechanic for the Ocher Model 11, or you can use the Fritex mechanic. That's basically what he's saying. So he's advocating for two things here. The first one is the Mitsubishi G4 M2E Model 24 Thai. Now, this was a specific model of the G4M, which was designed to carry the Ocher. It didn't have any bomb bay doors. It had extra heavy metal plating around the place, so it would protect the crew, and it also had the harness system for the Ocher, below it. So pretty much the idea of the Ocher is it is a manned bomb, a manned guided bomb with a propulsion system. So maybe a man-guided missile would be the better way of describing it. And the problem with adding something like this in-game is, of course, it is a suicide weapon. At the end of the day, you had to put a person into it who was going to guide it in by themselves to die. In order to cause as much damage as possible in a kamikaze attack. And I know we have a lot of aircraft in the game which were specifically, well, not specifically designed for it, but they had variants which, were designed for it. The Ocher's only purpose is to kamikaze. And therefore, it is definitely a moral issue to talk about. Now, I'm not going to give my opinion where I kind of stand on the issue. It would be nice to see the G4M2E Model 24 Thai, but I suppose without the Ocher, there isn't really much point unless you want a bit more armor with a little bit of a slower Mitsubishi. The Ocher itself, we do have all the mechanics to make it work in the game, but it is definitely a bit of a quandary. The next one is an N1K, and I love the N1Ks, and the reason for that is because every time I read about them, I seem to find different sources on the matter, which say different things. This is the N1K1JC from Tarapai, and the N1K1JC. Now, what is this? Well, first of all, you got the JA. This is the standard one. The standard N1K, but they weren't happy with what the offensive armament was, so they upped it. They changed some of the guns around, they changed the secondary armaments that it could carry, so it could carry some heavier bombs, and this was the N1K1JB. And then the N1K1JC came along, and what they did was they made it so it could use a 500 kilo bomb and also carry some rocket boosters behind it. The modified aircraft was capable of attacking aircraft carriers at a speed of nearly 740 kilometers an hour due to the power of the rocket booster. So the idea there are three things here, right? So you either use rocket boosters to take off, you use rocket boosters to propel yourself into an enemy in a kamikaze attack, or you use the rocket boosters to get into a position to drop your bombs. Now, a lot of the time, these rocket boosters were used in kamikaze attacks, so therefore, this N1K1 might be one of those morally dubious ones again, but at least it had other, reasons for existing. There's also reports that the N1Ks could carry a ton, 1,000 kilo bomb. I mean, at this point, sure, why not? Like, the Japanese sourcing is so all over the place. It is just kind of hard to work out what is true and what is not unless you actually have pictures of it. And even with the N1K1s, it's hard to tell, is it a JA, a JB, or a JC? And the only really way you can tell is the armaments that is found on the aircraft. The next one is the Reggiani 2004. This is from Shepard FR, and he calls it the Forgotten Sagittario, and he isn't wrong. It is forgotten, and the reason for it is because it was developed at exactly the same time as the 2005, which is the one which I've talked about many times. It's the one which has the wonderful German engine in it, looks like a beautiful piece of machinery, and the 2004, the only reason it existed is because that engine that they wanted to put in the 2005 was not available, or they couldn't get their hands on it as much as they wanted. So before they could get their hands on the engine that they wanted, which was for the 2005, they created an Italian-made engine for the 2004 called the Isotta Fraschini Zeta RC2460 engine, which was an X-shaped 24-cylinder liquid-cooled engine with around about 1,250 horsepower. The problem with this is the only test that happened with this engine, let's just say it pulled itself apart along with everybody else with it, and it definitely didn't end up too well. But if you want a Reggiani aircraft, the 2004 would fit, and also along with the 2005, it would be nice to see both of them. Two 20mm MG151s and two Breda Safats as well. As I said, it's exactly the same composition as the 2005. The only thing difference is that the 2005 had, of course, the DB605 engine. Hell of a lot more powerful and a hell of a lot more fun when it comes to it. The next one is the Fiat G50V, or the G51 Veloci. This is one of those aircraft where we have the G50s in game, and they feel very underpowered. Like, their engines do not feel good to use. They feel like very floaty planes because they don't have the oomph that is required to go forward. Well, the G50V solved this problem, and it solved it by using the DB601. Specifically the DB601A-1, and you can see it right here in this picture. So they basically just took a G50, added this DB engine to it, and kept the same armament in the form of the two 12.7mm Breda Safat machine guns, only 300 rounds, which is a bit of an issue. It got to the prototype stage, but after, fixing it up and dealing with the various defects of the G50V, the aircraft was seen as something which was doing really well. The problem is, as many of these find themselves with, the G50V and many others, they were outdone by their competitors, specifically the G55 in this case. And the fact is, the G55 was a massive improvement over the G50V. It only happened about 3 or 4 months after, the G50V was being tested. And during the time the G50 was tested, there was also another pretty nice plane, the C202 Folgore, which dealt with not just the engine issues, but also dealt with the armament issues. And because of this, the main production lines of the Italians went towards creating the MC202s instead of the G50V. So this aircraft, yes, fault of its own. But the main thing was it was fully functional. They worked out all the kinks of it. They worked out all the problems. And yes, it would be lovely to see it in game in some capacity. But just understand its history, that it was beaten out by the 202. So even with the DB601A1 engine, it's obviously going to have issues in performance. And this was from Krausbart. The next one is a wonderful, the Aramaki or Aramachi MB339C. I've talked about this jet before. I'm not talking about it again because people always misconstrue what I say about this jet. It is a trainer jet that the Italians had. It's by Epic Blitzkrieg 87. If you want more information, go read it yourself. I'm not interested in dealing with the people who I always have to deal with when talking about these specific aircraft. Next one is from Shepherd FR again. This is the D551, the French Mustang. Well, that's a hell of a name. So if you don't know about this one, it's a prototype which came around the early time of World War II, just like a lot of French aircraft, and it was a development from the De Watney D550, which was an unarmed plane which was used for speed testing. A lot of aircraft back then, you know, they were speedsters, which were eventually converted to military combat, and this one to me looks very reminiscent of the ME-209, if you remember our looks at that in the past. So the D550, it was test flown by Marcel de Ray on the 23rd of June 1939, and the pilot really liked it. You know, it was fast, it had good climb rates, it probably handled pretty well, and it had in it a 1,000 horsepower Hispano-Suiza 12Y51 engine. The French, after testing it, decided to arm it, and so the D550C1, which was what it was, became the D551. The plane, the first plane was built in the winter of 39 and 40, and the French Air Force liked the engines to finish the first production batch. So they waited too long, and only 3 D551s saw their engines in May 1940, and obviously the French surrendered in June of 1940. The project was cancelled. It was supposed to have on it 5 7.5mm machine guns, or at least the blueprints were for 5 of them, but in the end it would have had 6 7.5mm Mac 1934s, 3 in each wing, and of course the Hispano, the HS-404 cannon in the nose. So overall, there's a lot to this aircraft. It would be very similar to me. It would be very similar to the VG-33, and it is another testament to the French issues that they had at the start of the war when it came to production. They were very good at ordering things, but building them was definitely a problem. The next one is the Mystère. This is the Dassault MD453 Mystère 3N de Nuit, which was a closer bridge to the Mystère 4. This is by Blitzkrieg again. It's another one of these French aircraft which is armed with DEFAs and has huge air intakes and looks exactly the same as all of the rest of them. It isn't a supersonic aircraft. At sea level it could go 1,080 kilometers an hour. So yeah, it isn't, you know, it's not supersonic, but it's once again very, very close. It will act exactly like all of the other French jets in the game, and it won't get used. The next one is the independent Dutch Aviation tech tree by Super Cacti, and this was actually, Super Cacti hit me up on Discord and pretty much said, hey, you know, I see that you're going over these things. Do you want to see the updated stuff for the Dutch Ground Force tech tree? And I thought, yeah, hell yeah, why not? So he sent me a War Thunder Live link, and I'll leave this in the description too, so you can have a look at it. And it's pretty much him with the different tech trees depending on what you want to see. So he's done a version of the Dutch aircraft only, without paper and blueprint aircraft. Then we've got Dutch and foreign aircraft, does not include paper blueprint aircraft. Then the third is Dutch aircraft only, with the paper and blueprint aircraft. And the fourth is Dutch and foreign aircraft, which includes everything as well. Now, if we look at the first post that he does, he actually talks about an interesting thing. So, for him, a tech tree doesn't have to be it doesn't have to go up to rank 5, and I agree with this. You know, I've talked about in the past how I think it would be much better if we have these little minor tech trees all over the place, which, you know, are either attached to other nations or not. I mean, there are different ways you could do it. So you could do it the helicopter way, which is like, okay, so if you get to like rank 3 or Britain, then you unlock this minor aircraft Dutch tech tree, right? You could do that. Or you could do, if you hit level 20 in War Thunder, you get access to this independent Dutch ground forces tech tree, or this, or the Dutch Air Forces tech tree. All of this stuff could work in its own way, and I think personally that it could work pretty well in those ways. I think I might do a specific video talking about that stuff later on. But here is the tech tree in itself. As you can see, just really 3 ranks. This is the first one, the most bare one, I suppose you would say, but a lot of Fokkers, a few Shelds, and I will leave a link to this post so you can have a look at some of the weird and wonderful designs yourself. As you can see, the Shelled S21 down here with the very similar to the Narval, which is kind of cool. Then you have some designs which look eerily similar to the P-38s, then some boat planes as well. Here we go with all the foreign stuff as well. He does talk about in his post, actually, that when it comes to the Netherlands join the Allies, so the Netherlands will only fight with the Americans, British, French, and maybe Russians. This means that whether you're fighting against rank 4 British or rank 4 British Dutch, you will still be fighting Spitfires and Sea Theories, thus not breaking the game in any way. He talks about the idea of not wanting to grind the same vehicles again, which is why, you have a bunch of Spitfires and Meteors and Seahawks and stuff. This would be, in my opinion, the tree I wouldn't like to see. I would much more prefer one which just has, the Dutch vehicles in it, and having it, only be up to rank 3 would be completely fine. Not every tree has to be crazy big, it's as kind of as simple as that. I would like to thank Super Cacti for creating this Dutch tree, and I would also like to thank him for giving me the updated information so I can give it to you guys, and I'm sure if he has any more questions, or you have any more questions, you can hit him up either in War Thunder Live or in Discord or wherever. I'll leave a link to this post so you can see it yourself. I've also done some videos on some of the Fokkers, and this is one of them. It's the Fokker G1. You can find it in the User Models and Missions playlist, and also I did one on the Fokker TV. These were both made by Z Peregrine, and Peregrine, and I hope that in the future he makes some more models because they are absolutely fantastic. The next one is, of course, the Swedes. Nobody can forget the Swedes. If we're ever talking about independent tech trees, all I hear in the back of my head is somebody pounding it with the word Sweden. And this is made by McPuff, and McPuff is talking about Sweden and War Thunder, whether it's the ground tech trees or whether it's the air tech trees. And if you want to have a look at probably the most comprehensive list of stuff for a specific independent nation, this would be it. The Swedish have enough vehicles when it comes to the air to be competitive from rank 1 to 5, even to rank 6 and 7 now, and for ground forces it's exactly the same thing. There may be a few little holes here and there, but overall they do have a lot of great stuff going on. So I did a few videos with some of the leaders of the tech tree project, Block High. I also talked to Pytor, who was the one who introduced me to, the Swedish tech tree stuff. He's actually a moderator over on the Tech Hub. So there's a few videos such as arguments for the Swedish tech trees. Then we have the part 2 of that. And then, of course, recently I did a user model of the Saab 38 Sparv in-game. But understand that this is just an interesting, weird and wonderful user model, and not really close to the designs, at least, that they made for the Saab. But then again, it was never built, so you could definitely just say that, it was there. So yeah, I talked to SB15 and also Block High, and I haven't talked personally to McPuff. but I have talked about everybody else who is involved in the project, and overall it seems really good. I'm sure at some point, if we are going to get an expansion of nations, Sweden will be one of the ones on the top of the list. I just want them to do it now, so I stop hearing about it. It reminds me of the Abrams has got the wrong armor. I must hear that like 50 times a day. It is how it is, and it drains the soul. But anyway, that is all of the suggestions which were passed on to the developers in September 2018. You can tell there's a hell of a lot of them. There's a lot of passionate people in the community, and I'm very, very happy to be able to highlight this. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Blackie for the support on Patreon.